This episode of the Linux Action Show is brought to you by the good-looking folks at GoDaddy.com. Use our code Linux and save yourself some cash. And welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 18, Episode 7. My name is Chris, and joining me on the amazing internet Skype line is Alan. Hey there, Alan. Welcome back.
Hey.
Now, I should mention that we are shooting this episode early. We normally shoot this live on Sundays, but because I'll be on a road trip down to Cryptic, Alan and I are in the studio here, and we're going to do this on Thursday. We did this immediately after TechSnap. So apologies if you tuned in live expecting to catch the Linux Action Show. We'll be back on our regular time next Sunday. Do we have a good show today, or what? We're talking.
I think we do, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, after the news docket, which we always have to cover, and our picks that we have for you this week, we're going to talk about LVM, the Logical Volume Manager, and honestly, you guys, I'm going to tell you how easy it is to set up, and you will not believe that if you have not used LVM before, you will not believe that you haven't taken advantage of this awesome software that's probably already built into the Linux distro you use. Yeah? Mm-hmm. All right, yep. Alan. Now, before we talk about all of that stuff and our Android picks, I want to give a mention to our good buddies over at GoDaddy.com. Now, GoDaddy.com, of course, is the world's #1 domain name registrar, but more importantly than that, Alan, you just scored yourself an epic domain from GoDaddy.com.
Yes, I did.
Well, okay. Can you lay it on us? Because I don't think people are going to believe this one was
available. We managed
to
get scalablehosting.com.
Scalablehosting.com.
Yeah.
A good one. Did you use the code Linux?
Yes.
You save 10% on checkout when you use the code Linux, and you save 20% when you use the code Linux20 on hosting. So that's not bad if you want to throw a site up.
Yeah, and the other thing is some of the features they have are quite nice. Like, for example, the account executive thing that you use, so that for some of your domains, you could delegate authority over them to me, so I could set them up for Scale Engine when we moved your sites over. Yeah?
Which makes the whole administrating from end to end a lot easier for you. I love that whole aspect of it.
And they also have the ability to transfer domains between accounts.
Yeah.
So originally our business domains were kind of separated in my account and my business partner's account, but we consolidated them all into one folder in my account that he has the account executive privileges over. So being able to just shift domains between accounts without having to do like a transfer, so it didn't have to pay any extra money. You can just zap domains between different GoDaddy accounts.
That is nice. And it's also the advantage of having a registrar that's so widely used that you're gonna the other people you're working with, your other peers, will often already have GoDaddy accounts and ready to do that. Now, we are going to talk about all kinds of things, but before we do that, I want to tell you Android users out there about my app pick this week. I kind of feel like a moron for not mentioning this sooner. It's that good of an app that you need to put it in your just essential Android toolbox. So you're going to need to get this one, Alan, for your Nexus. Yes. And it's Astro File Manager. I'm dumbfounded I haven't mentioned this one before. I am absolutely dumbfounded. But
and this is the same people that make the Samba client we talked about.
The SMB module. Yeah, it plugs into Astro File Manager. And I couldn't believe I was telling you to get a plugin for an app I hadn't recommended yet. So I had to rectify that in this episode. This lets you browse the file system on your Android device like the real computer that it is. You know what I mean? So you get access to like your SD card, your home folder, your mount drive, all that kind of stuff. I mean, and it's free. So go check out Astro File Manager. It's a great way to clean things up if your SD card gets kind of junked up. I mean, it's just got great reviews. It's an obvious one. And yeah, like the chat room saying, is Astro is epic, and it works great. So yeah. Now, if you remember last week, we said we were going to start doing a universal pick. Right? It might be a BSD thing. It might be a Linux app. And just to sort of prep you guys for all the different things that the universal app pick might encompass, I'm also going to throw web apps in there. I'm going to throw one in there. It already has some of you on automatic hater mode, but you're just going to have to check it out. And that is Linus Torvalds' Google Plus page.
Yep.
Now, okay, I know. Alan, you looked at this last night and you thought, what, really, Chris, you're going to do
yeah, but he's got some good stuff on there.
He actually really does. Like he talks about like this is how I found out that the next version of the Linux kernel is going to be delayed. He's also talking about some other custom software not even related to the Linux kernel, runs on Linux, that he's been writing, and you can follow that. And Linus responds to his comments. I mean, if you want to go have a conversation with Linus Torvalds, this is the platform to do it, and that's incredible. So link to Linus's Google Plus profile as well as Alan and my profile in the show notes. So go check that out. Now, Alan, we've got... I should mention, too, that I've got links to all my previous Android picks in the show notes. Now, we've got a ton of news, Alan, so what
did you do your runs Linux yet?
Oh, my gosh, I didn't. Oh, thank you. Jeez, you'd think after 178 episodes I might have it down. You know, originally in episode 1 of the Linux Action Show, the whole runs Linux thing started was Brian introduced me, and I just needed something to say. I was like, well, you know, my TiVo runs Linux, and that was like all I had. But then I had to keep it going. But I overshot on my first one. TiVo runs Linux was a good one, but this one's not bad. This one kind of takes the concept of TiVo and brings it to the whole home, and it's a home automation system that runs Linux. And it's a Linux-based whole ecosystem with tablets or Android devices, but what really kind of has my interest piqued are these little hardware front-end nodes that you just hook up to your TV that are low quiet, low power, and they sort of channel the content from your back-end Linux system. And then you can manage it all with these touchscreen devices that can turn on lights and start movies and, I don't know, wash your dishes, all those kinds of things.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they're actually little computers, too. They've got 500 gigabyte hard drives in them. They've got SATA connectors for additional storage, as well as Intel and x86-based chips. The tablets are ARM-based. It's pretty neat. And if you want to check it out, you can go read up on it. But I just thought, you know, if you walked into somebody's home and their whole home system was running off this automated Linux system, this would be pretty cool. If I ever make it big, Alan, if I ever make it rich, I'm going to get one of these bad boys installed in my place.
Yeah, because, you know, controlling a bunch of that stuff from your Android phone would just be great.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, that your tablet as a fancy remote control for your whole home entertainment system.
Right. Or how about just like a tablet to control the lighting system in the studio? That actually would be really nice because I got to walk around.
Especially if it had like dimmers so you could slide up and down.
Yeah. Or turn off like I have 2 big lights right here and there's 4 lights in each. So 8 lights on total, right? But I only have 2 in each. So if I could like, you know, sit here on the tablet and be like, turn that one on, that'd be really sweet.
And, you know, between shows you can have them on so that it's not so hot. And
yeah, totally. Oh, I just need to get a Linux automation system. That's all. That's all I need to do. So go check that out. It's pretty cool. It's the company is called Control 4. And what I like about Control 4's approach is you have the whole package from the back end to the front end to the TV to the control devices. And it's Linux through and through, which is really cool. So check that out. All right, Al, now with all of that out of the way, let's do the news.
Yep.
All right, Alan, the top story on the news docket for this week has rocked the IT world. And if you've seen a lot of Linux people getting all worked up about this one, throwing some punches. And so we had to throw at the top of our news docket. Next-gen boot spec for Windows 8 could forever lock Linux off of PCs. This is
not exactly, but
I know, but that's how it's being reported, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's going around like wildfire. This particular headline came from Network World. Really what this is about is Windows 8. If you want to be Windows 8 certified and get the Windows 8 logo program and all of that kind of stuff, you have to use this new spec called UEFI or something like that.
Yes. Now, this is a spec that Intel came up with in 96 or 98 for the Itanium processors. And it's basically a complete replacement of the BIOS type system.
Yes.
And it's actually quite good. And part of it includes basically a cryptographic system for making sure that your master boot record or the equivalent of it isn't getting changed.
Yeah, and they claim, Microsoft claims that this UEFI system, because it doesn't use the BIOS, it's part of how they get their 8-second boot time. But one of the things you can do with UEFI is you can only execute things that are digitally signed, right?
Yeah.
So if Microsoft has...
Yeah, updates to the UEFI have to be digitally signed or something like that.
With a key that either the UEFI group has, or boy, that's hard to say, or that Microsoft would have. So say if you had like Grub and you wanted to load it into the boot sector and then boot it, unless it was signed specifically by one of these groups, the code would simply just fail to execute. And then Grub wouldn't be able to start and load your Linux installation. Or I might point out your Windows 7 installation, your Windows XP installation, your FreeBSD installation, you name it. Right? So
exactly.
This doesn't seem like one of those things that's actually going to be as bad as everyone thinks it is, but it's definitely still worth something to track. And I think it's also worth bearing in mind that the Chromebooks have this. Yeah. But they use it for Linux. So it is possible. I contacted the UEFI group about this last night. Admittedly, not really enough time. One day isn't enough time for them to respond. But my main concern is how can an open source project use this service in compliance with their license? Because anything that's going to be GPL3 licensed is going to be incompatible unless they include the key with the source code. And then that would be stupid. They wouldn't do that, so it's not going to happen.
Well, now, part of this is, I think, the end user might have a key they can use to update their own version. So the user would, as part of installing Grub or whatever, would sign it. Now, the thing is, if Microsoft has a deal with, say, Dell, saying you don't give the users their key.
Right. That's what I'm
Right?
worried about.
We'll give you Windows for $200 off or whatever, for like, even cheaper than normal on the PCs, where you lock the user so they can't do anything except for Windows with it.
Now, the other thing they're saying, because like Acid Punk's saying in the chat room, and I totally agree with him, he's like, who cares about 8 seconds boot time? I mean, and we have said that on Linux Action Show too. It's like, this is not worth 8 seconds worth of boot time. But I think...
If you don't have to reboot every 2 minutes, I don't care if it takes 10 seconds or 20 seconds instead of 8 seconds to boot.
But isn't the other line that we're being given here is that this is to protect against like rootkit injections and things like that?
Sure.
Yeah,
but
still
it
not buying
shouldn't
enough.
limit what I can do with the hardware I buy.
I absolutely agree, and this is the same boat we're
as
kind of
long
with
as
Android.
I have the keys so that I can install Linux if I want to, but at the same time prevent, boot sector viruses and so on, that would be the best of both worlds.
What's been fascinating about this story is to see the different types of people chiming in. One of whom is Matthew Garrett, who is the power management and mobile Linux developer over at Red Hat, and he's chimed in, and he's not very happy about this either. Also, Linux Weekly Net has done an amazing write-up on this technology, and I really encourage people to go do it. I really like Network Summary here, and they say the basic idea behind Secure Boot is to sign an executable using a public shared cryptographic scheme. The public part of the platform key can be stored in the firmware and used by the root key. Additional key exchange keys can also have their public portion stored in the firmware. So this could be, one of those keys could be the end user's own key.
Right.
So it is possible in the technology spec for them to do it. And and there's also other things per the spec they could do, like in case of the Chromebooks. I don't know if this is true for all of them, but like that little CR48 Chromebook actually has a physical switch to disable the UEFI boot environment, at least the secure portion. But man, this is definitely one of the things where you could see, where you take like my Galaxy Tab, my original Samsung Galaxy Tab. I can't load anything but what came on there unless I can circumvent their copy protection. I could see with the Metro UI and an ARM tablet running Windows 8, I could see Microsoft wanting to lock that down to only run Windows, just like my Galaxy Tab is locked down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the opposite of what we need. We need these vendors to come in with these open tablet PCs that we can load any OS on. Yep. And I think Microsoft just really doesn't have any interest in that happening. So
not at all.
I think the primary goal here wasn't necessarily to screw Linux. I don't think, but at the same time, I don't think Microsoft cares that it's happening. I don't think they care.
No. And I think on enthusiast type motherboards, we'll see the option to either disable secure boot or have the keys to sign your boot sector to be able to use it. But I'm concerned that some of these like commodity PCs might not give you that option.
Yeah, exactly. And
so that has a lot more to do with what happens when we get to the point where those are recycled PCs.
Or what happens, I guess it's going to be also a challenge for people to build their own PCs. You won't be able to, if you're building your own PC, you won't really care about being part of the
You'll be buying a motherboard that will have the ability to disable that feature.
And you won't care if you're part of the Windows logo program, right? You only have to implement this if you want to be a vendor selling these products that nobody's going to buy, and then you want to have a Windows logo on the box. And but really, who's that going to be? I mean, these things are going to hit the market, and they're going to flop just like everything else that has Microsoft on the name these days. What does Microsoft launch in the last 5 years that has taken off like crazy? Windows Phone? No. The Zune? No. The Kin? No. Mm-hmm. Bing? Well, maybe a little bit, but it just cost them like $5 million too in the last quarter. So Microsoft has the stench of failure on them, and I think this is one thing they can do to try to prevent. I think what Microsoft doesn't want to do is usher in a whole new era of open hardware platforms, that these tablet form factors that anybody can load their own OS on, and then people buy these things up and don't load Windows on them.
But I can see this being more of an issue on laptops than desktops.
Oh, interesting.
Right? On desktops, you're building your own. You can buy a motherboard that's going to allow you to have the ability to install Linux on it. But on most laptops you buy will come with Windows on them or whatever, and you might want to be able to dual boot them or replace it with Linux.
And see, I'm more concerned about tablets.
Yeah.
Because I think this is going to be I think every tablet maker out there will do this for some reason.
Right, but the tablet makers, those are more dedicated purpose devices.
True. But wouldn't you love to be able to buy like a really sweet tablet and load any OS you want on it?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
But, hardware compatibility and so on is going to be an issue there at some point.
Yeah. Now, a lot of different people have weighed in on this, and so I went through and grabbed some of the best links on this story.
Yes, you have quite a plethora of links in there. So.
Yeah, you like that? Did I go overboard, do you think?
No.
I just really I wanted to like absorb the story. I didn't want to come on the show and like just freak out about, oh my God, Microsoft and oh my God this. But we do have a couple of stories this week that I'm like, I want to go down there and kick some Microsoft ass.
Yeah.
I mean, like the next 3 stories we're about to cover and the next 2 stories we're about to cover are just more of Microsoft screwing up. And it's driving me nuts. Why don't we talk about this?
But, Microsoft didn't invent this UEFI thing.
No, that's true.
And it's already starting to be adopted, and it's kind of important for future hardware compatibility.
The crappy thing Microsoft's doing is requiring the secure component of it as part of the Windows 8 logo program.
Yeah.
And I buy that they claim this is to prevent malware protection. But one of the other features of Windows 8 is early boot scanning, like before the whole OS is loaded. And I don't know, you don't have to have one to have the other. And at a certain point, the functionality and flexibility of the expensive tool I bought and its multi-purpose capability becomes more important than the push it on and it just works like a toaster options, I think.
Exactly.
Now, other things that in the Microsoft realm is, Alan, you threw this in here about what is this? The subsystem, the Unix subsystem that Microsoft has touted as ever is making Windows POSIX compliant is getting the axe in Windows 8.
Yes, in Windows 8, subsystem for Unix applications is deprecated, so you can still install it, but you get a big warning saying that all future versions of Windows will not allow this.
Yeah, who needs it? Sigwin.
Right. But some people run applications that depend on this.
Oh, yeah. No, I have a couple clients that the software vendor did like a half port of like an old software, and it requires the Unix services for Windows to completely run. So, yeah.
And when they say future versions of Windows, does that mean that it's going to stop working at the end of the beta and the full release of Windows 8 won't support it? Or is it after Windows 8 that it's going to be gone?
Oh, good question. Yeah, it's like just in there now to help smooth
the
transition.
But, at the same time, now that virtualization's so big, most people would just run it in a Linux virtual machine on top of the Windows anyway.
Seriously.
If in the case where they needed it.
I agree.
So maybe it's not a big deal, but, it is... if they're killing off this, does it mean they're going to kill off their username mapping thing for NFS?
Doesn't that use this?
Probably.
I think it does.
I don't actually know.
That's a nice little feature when you have that. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's talk about another thing that Microsoft's doing. This is becoming the story of the week almost. Microsoft this week announced that they have approached Casio, and then they have squeezed money out of them just like a good mafia mob would do. They went there and went, "Excuse me, Casio? Can I get in there, please? We believe you're using some of our technology, and we want to get in there. You use that Linux, don't you? And you know that Linux, it violates our patents." Which patents, Microsoft? Oh, don't worry about that, but you just need to pay us. Of course they identify the patents, but you have this situation now where Microsoft's going around to vendor to vendor to vendor. We're talking about this every week, and now it's Casio, and they're going to Casio, and Casio's paying up to Microsoft for the use of Linux. It says here the agreement is an implicit acknowledgement of Microsoft's long-standing claims that Linux violates its patents. Oh,
yeah, and see, what's happening here is Microsoft is bullying people. People don't want to go to court and contest this, even though they probably believe that the patents are bogus. But it's easier to just pay. Yeah, but every person that pays is setting this precedence that the patent isn't bogus.
And then it almost doesn't matter. Because if you have to wonder, you just have to wonder how close they are to, if this got out there in the public, would the internet and all of the people that were in the know, would they tear it apart and find all of the flaws, and then Microsoft wouldn't have a moneymaker, and that's why they don't disclose it? Or is there a legal reason not to just tell the world, hey, we believe Linux is violating these patents of ours, these are our property, and we don't want you using them? And then the Linux community, if they held up, would just code around that like we always have, and we'd adapt, and open source would make it happen. And without that sort of heads up from Microsoft... Or
at the same time, Linux would prove prior art and be like, well, we had this invented before you patented it, so your patent is invalid, go away.
Isn't this just a better, smarter play at what SCO's game was?
I think so, yeah.
And I would think if I'm a Linux vendor, or if I'm a hardware vendor like Casio or like HTC, and I'm looking at my next mobile operating system, I'm going, well, I can use this here, I can use this here, but this thing here based off...
The Linux one is free and the Windows one costs this much per device, but Microsoft is going to sue me and make me pay X per device to use Linux. Right. So then now that the price difference isn't really there... Do I spend $25 a machine or $35 a machine and pay Microsoft to license Windows platform, which then comes with all of these associated services with it too? Or do I spend $15 per device and have to do a whole bunch of in-house R&D development
and use Android. I think that's really what their two choices are coming down to these days, and I think Microsoft feels like they have a winning chance if they can scare people into not using Android.
Yeah, and it'd be really nice if I could invalidate the patent that they're talking about, and they had to refund everybody who licensed that patent.
Oh my gosh, what a victory
that would be great,
right?
But that's never going to happen because I'm sure the deal is structured in such a way that, it wouldn't be refundable.
Did I like look away for too long and like think Microsoft was slowing down and getting slightly less evil, and then all of a sudden like it all seems to just be accumulating again, and it's like they haven't changed anything. They're still just as anti-competitive and just as aggressive as they always have been. Some of it you expect from a business, but some of it there's just a certain point.
Google's been crying foul about the Microsoft-Apple Oracle alliance for a while now.
Yeah. All right, and I have been too. And now I'm crying foul about Microsoft, and the best guys like us can do is just get the word out there and let people know. Yep. And then as long as the public is informed, then when people hear this stuff, they have a little better idea of what's really going on. Now, speaking of Microsoft, who's often lobbying some attacks over at Android and Google, this time there was a jab that came from an unexpected source, and that's Richard Stallman. I
wouldn't say unexpected.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Although, I guess unexpected in the sense of, I just surprised that he hasn't said anything sooner.
Yeah.
I guess because he hadn't said anything, and by this point, I just figured he wasn't going to say anything. Like, I just thought, okay, he just doesn't care. Yeah. But no, Richard Stallman cares about everything, and Android, he claims, is not respecting users' freedoms. And he goes through and he makes a few good points in here, and the Guardian has a good write-up on it, and so does Digitizer.
I love the old picture of Stallman they always pull up.
Yeah.
To make him look like a crackhead.
Yeah, they always do kind of go for like the eccentric although he honestly is generally...
That's still what he looks like.
Yeah, it's kind of the same, yeah. He says, this is Stallman talking here, he says, I think that they do post the source code of Linux, just not the rest of Android. But it's hard for me as a user to know. And what he's really taken issue with something that, and I felt a kindred spirit connection with Richard Stallman because Brian and I had got on here when Honeycomb was announced, and we really kind of got up in a tizzy about the fact that they were not releasing the Honeycomb source code. They still haven't.
Yep.
Supposedly we're going to see Ice Cream Sandwich, but we still haven't seen it yet. Guess what? While we took a lot of heat for that, Richard Stallman also feels the same way. It's kind of disingenuous to claim you're open and developing out in the open and then, hold all that.
And he's saying, they're doing like the legal minimum, but they're not giving us any more.
Right, now, and he calls Google's... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and we've seen that document from Google saying that they plan to open source it to allow it to grow after. They just want to finish their innovation cycle first so that somebody can't steal their thunder.
See, and Richard Stallman, and I agree with him here, he says, Google's claim that Honeycomb wasn't going to be released, the source code wasn't going to be released because it's not ready yet, and we don't want to release it until it's ready for you to see. We don't want you to look at our bad code. But that is such bull crap, because that's the number one thing the open source community could do is help you with that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So only opening it would accelerate that. So I'm just glad he's got his eye on this. And
then we saw from that internal slideshow what their actual purpose is. They're trying to keep their innovation secret until after they've captured the market.
He also goes on to give a few digs at the Apache license that a lot of Android is covered with. And, he says, yeah, sure, the Linux part's GPL covered, but then all the other stuff is all locked up inside of the Apache license, which he feels doesn't...
The Apache license is okay. It just has a lot of specific stuff about patents in it. And
which
with Google's current circumstances, you can understand why they want protection from patents.
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. So interesting enough story, and that's one I would like to get your thoughts on, everyone. We don't talk about Android a lot. I know we talk about it more than a lot of you would like, but you know what? Honestly, it's one of the biggest things happening in Linux right now, and it's also one of the biggest movers and shakers in the tech industry, period. So it's going to get talked about, and I want to know what you think.
Just like you said last week, is 2012 going to be the year of Android on the desktop?
Yeah. So leave us a comment and let us know what you think. Do you agree with Richard Stallman? Is Android not properly respecting your freedoms? And does it matter? For your handset, for your mobile device, do you care if it's respecting your freedoms?
Is there one that would respect it more? There isn't really one out there yet.
Hands on, yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk about some exciting news for the Linux desktop, and that is continued development in the direction of an ultimate video editor. OpenShot 1.4 has been released. Also, there's little tidbits in here about the good, sweet future of OpenShot. So, like any major video editor release, there's a bunch of must-have features in here. Timeline improvements, more stable effects, new 3D animations, new transitions, tons of bug fixes. But what is and there's a video of the demo of some of these improvements, which is really kind of cool. But what is really, really something is a quick mention that he's working towards GTK3 support. But Alan, he put in here that he's switching to developing a OpenShot library, something that will handle a lot of the back-end stuff that a video editor needs, so that somebody could take this on Windows, on Linux, on Mac OS X, take this library, and then build a video editing front end on top of it. Yep. He's trying to create the ultimate open source video editing library. What do you think? Doable?
Yeah, I think so. It's the same idea behind like libav codec, which is the basis of FF, MPEG, VLC, MPlayer, and the like. Yeah,
and I like his quote here.
That's for decoding and encoding, but this would be for actually video editing. And, the fact that if you could have a same program that worked properly on Windows, Mac, and Linux, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Ubuntu users, you can actually get this 1.4 version. There's a daily PPA or something like that you can grab. I honestly, when I first heard that he was planning to switch to also developing a video library, he starts off by explaining that it was kind of necessary just to reach the features he needed in OpenShot. But this seems like a common route that a lot of open source developers go down, where they decide, hold on,
to leave the UI up to somebody else.
Leave the UI up to somebody else. I need to focus on the infrastructure. And we have had that happen a lot in this space. So I was really concerned when he said that. But then, reading on the blog post here, here's what he had to write. My ultimate vision is this: a video editing library that's cross-platform, object-oriented, multi-threaded, frame-accurate, with a powerful key animation system, Python support, and so on. But here's what I really dug into. So, for the past 8 months, I've been working harder than ever before to create the backbone for this new library and establish a strong, stable code base to build it on. The library is written in C++ with all original handcrafted code, and is fully cross-platform, building on Windows, Linux, and Mac. Although Linux is his primary target, and it'll be GPL licensed. Nice. So he's already got some traction on this library, and he still managed to get the latest version of OpenShot out while working on it for the past 8 months. So this isn't just like one of those pie-in-the-sky ideas.
Right, he has the stable API such that he can take the existing GUI and connect it to his improved back end, and then at some point somebody can design an even better user interface for it.
Which is really, really awesome. So it's like there's some actual, wood behind the arrow already.
Yep.
And now this next one, it
actually kind of fits what some people are talking about in the chat room right now. A free mobile OS.
Yeah, something we've talked a lot about on last. And I totally missed this, Alan. You caught this and you threw it in the news docket, and it's called Inferno. The Inferno OS, right? And it is
this is an OS that Bell Labs started developing back in the 90s, and it kind of just sits on a shelf now. But some researchers at a company have managed to get it running on existing Android phones and get with a touch interface.
Wow. So this is like a potential Android replacement.
You can tell that it's from the 90s. Yeah. But that's just some graphics that need to be done.
Yeah.
You obviously have windowing, multitasking, and some of the basics of a whole OS right here.
And so the idea is that if they got this guy working a little bit, people might be able to take like their Galaxy tabs that can't get upgraded and eventually throw something like this on there, which is, boy. I mean, the nice thing about something like this is that it's already going to be optimized for that mobile device. I still don't know if I see the real need for this versus like a super tuned up version of Fedora or Ubuntu. I mean, why wouldn't that just work? That's already sort of pre-built with the right desktop environment, and you just load that. Why do you have to have like its own dedicated operating system? What do you think?
Yeah. And
it just doesn't seem like it's totally necessary to me. It seems like a good idea. It seems like something we should follow, but maybe there's pieces I'm not missing, because I'd almost rather have like, now you can download Ubuntu or Kubuntu, or you can download, the different. I just like to have one of those options would be download Ubuntu for your phone.
Yeah.
And I just download that ISO
it's
and I flash
Linux
my
and
phone.
then with the Android Java UI on top of it. So if you just replace that with some other UI, then yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting to watch the development and to see that people are already fast on the.
But yes, and it's interesting. Inferno OS is from Bell Labs, which is the same Bell Labs that did Plan 9 operating system.
Right. And
that there's a history of making very like pie in the sky type operating systems that a lot of that code ends up. A lot of their research ends up turning into stuff eventually.
Right. And what's the extra angle here is that they're actively trying to get it to run on Android devices, which I think is of particular interest because in a couple of years, we're going to have this gulf of devices out there in the marketplace. I mean, you think about, they say, what do they say? They're activating 400,000 a day? Something like that. And all of those, in probably 2 years, will not be able to run a current operating system.
Right.
And there's going to be this massive demand for these dual-core devices with tons of RAM in them and tons of storage and always-on data connectivity to have a modern operating system that their vendors just left them behind with. So Inferno OS, given a couple of years, might be in the sweet spot to take advantage of that.
Or, anything else that can run on the Android devices.
Yeah. Huh. I like this.
And,
so is Inferno UI, it's not, is it running on top of Linux? Or Inferno OS? Or is it its own?
I'm not sure.
Seems like if it goes back so far, it must be its own base from the start up.
I think so, yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap up the news docket, unless there's a story I missed, about a really interesting article over at techradar.com. And they took an inside look at Mint, Linux Mint. They went and interviewed some folks and talked a little bit about how it works and how the head guy of Mint gets the job done. They talk about how most of the idea generation comes from Clement Lebrave, who is the head guy at the Linux Mint project. Anyways, they go on to talk a lot about how they look at what the other distributions are doing and then try to decide what direction to take Mint and how they decide on a lot of times what direction to go. And a lot of the creative process is behind creating a distribution and how the structure works. It's a long article. It's it's like 6 pages or something? 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, 5 pages, something like that. Anyways, I'll link to it in the show notes. I'm a big fan of Linux Mint, and I didn't want to read the whole thing on the show, but I thought maybe you guys might like to check that out. And it's an interesting insight onto how something started as a real small little part-time project and then grew into this massively, one of the most popular end-user Linux distros out there that is now funded by its own community. People with contributions and donations. And how do you start as just this little small-time Linux guy making a distro that's a spin-off of Ubuntu, and how do you go from that and scale it up to this massive community effort? And it was a very fascinating read, so go check that out. There's a link in the show notes. Yeah? All right, Alan. Well, that's all the news for this week. Now it is time to help your Linux box nom through some additional storage. So I will say I use this a lot as whenever I have a box that I think I'm going to have a multi-year install on, something that I don't want to have to hassle around with for years, and I want a home drive that'll just get bigger and bigger as I add a bunch of crap to the system. LVM is perfect for that.
Yep. One
of the things LVM will let you do is once you have it all set up, you can just expand the storage pool and get it larger and larger. So if you know what, that 20 gigs you allocated to your /home, if that's not cutting anymore and you want that to be 50 gigs, slap another hard drive in, and then you can add it, you can set it up with LVM, and then you can just grow your storage. And that is a really nice feature. There's also a bunch of other great features about LVM, like snapshot backups and things like that, but I think I'm getting ahead of myself here. I think I should probably break down at sort of a beginner's level of what LVM is. And I won't spend too much time on it because we'll have links in the show notes, and I know a lot of you out there already know what it is, but real basically, LVM, it works in multiple layers. The first layer is you have the actual physical volumes you're going to be working with, your hard drives. In my case, I have 3 hard drives attached to this system. And you take those physical hard drives and you have to add them to a group of storage, a volume group, right?
Yeah, and you can have more than one, but in our case, we just have one.
Yeah, and then once you have all of the drives you want to use in a group, and then you can split them up into volumes and you can actually format and partition those volumes. And so essentially, LVM works in 3 layers. The physical drive, the groups of those drives, and then the partitions you make inside those groups. And if you get that concept, you kind of get the rest of LVM. And the best part of it is if you're setting up and doing an install for the first time, just about every Linux installer out there lets you do LVM during the drive partitioning setup. You just usually have to dig a little bit deeper. But if you've already got your system installed and you want to just add some drives to it, the guide I'm about to give you will show you how to do that. If you're not watching, then I recommend you listen along at home. So go install a couple of pieces of software, pause the show, and then play it as we're going through this part, and you can just follow right along. But the main piece of software we're going to use is something from the Red Hat camp called Logical Volume Management. And you're looking at it right here, right now. And it gives you a real nice GUI to manage setting up your LVM stuff. And of course, just like a cooking show, I already went ahead and kind of started cooking a little bit, and I've already created my group, and it's really easy to do that, so I just went ahead and started that. But once you have a group started, you have to start adding drives to this group, right? So let's take a look here. You can see on my left-hand side here, I've got volume groups, unallocated volumes, and uninitialized entities. Uninitialized entities is things like your existing non-LVM partitions. So like in my case, my root partition, my home partition, and my swap partition. Unallocated volumes are systems or are drives that are formatted and ready for Logical Volume Manager, but you just haven't used them yet. And then volume groups are the ones you've already set up. So we're going to add a drive that we have formatted for LVM. And again, you can do all of that through the Logical Volume Management software. We're going to use a drive that we formatted for LVM, and I'm going to add it to my storage group. So it's really pretty simple. You go down there and you find the drive, and you just say add to existing volume group. If this was the first one group you're going to make, you would actually click create new volume group. That's all you have to do. Since I've already made mine, I'll just say add to existing group. I choose the one I want. I'll choose the last rocks group that I have here. It just gives you a list of all the different groups you have on your system, and you say add. The system does a little bit of work. It actually doesn't take that long. And now you can see this blue log that's here on my screen is the volume group for the last rocks group. And there it is. Here's my physical volume that is it's like now just a big group of disks that are attached to my system. And according to the operating system, there's now just this large drive hanging off my computer. It's actually a collection of multiple drives put together.
Right. So that blue line is the size of all three of those physical drives put together.
So I added three 5 gigabyte drives. So now I have a total storage of 15 gigabytes. And now there's no RAID in this, but you could at the time of creation actually do a little RAID stuff. And like I mentioned, there's also LVM snapshot, so it's a good way to do backups that way. But now that I've got all of my storage pooled together, I'm going to go ahead and create a logical volume. So I'll say do that. Let's name it as I love LAS. And see, I could say if I want it mirrored here or if I want it striped. And I'm going to say go ahead and use the remaining size. So we're going to use 14.99 gigabytes. And go ahead and format it with, say, I don't know, extended 4. And you can even mount it. Wow, how about that? Let's try that. Let's see if it'll mount it. We'll mount it.
And so, as you can see here, you can set up this as software RAID or linear, which is just your regular stack the drives one after the other to make one big drive.
Yep. I think for the purposes of this example, I won't have it mounted. I'll show you how to do that separately. So I'll go ahead and say OK, and then it starts to do its work. And when it's done, I will have a 15 gigabyte partition that is a collection of 3 5 gigabyte drives. This is great if you have like a desktop and you have spare drives sitting around your house and you want to throw a few drives in your desktop and get storage out of it. You know what I've used it for? It's been an excellent way to store my VirtualBox images. Because, you get a VirtualBox disk all set up and you get your system going, but as you use it more, it starts to expand and that virtual drive gets bigger and bigger and now it needs more space. You're on LVM. No big deal. You go find that old hard drive that's laying around on your desk, pop it in the machine, add it to the volume group, and you're done. So
yes, that's the main advantage with that linear type is that you just add the disks one after the other, like stacking coins on top of each other, and you get 100% of the storage from each disk. Unlike with most types of RAID, where you get the smallest, whatever the size of the smallest drive times the number of drives.
Right.
In this one, you get the full capacity of all the drives, even if they're not the same size.
And the whole mismatch of drives is awesome. It's one of the features I love about Drobo, but you can do it here, right? And other file systems have this capability too, but one of the nice things about LVM is it lets you run any file system you want on top of it. So in this case, I'm doing extended 4. So, okay, there we go. So now I have an I Love LAS volume. And the other tool I want to say you should go check out is gparted. Just a fantastic utility. And gparted will kind of let you look at your new system and let you, would say if you wanted to reformat or something like that, it would show up in here and you could choose it.
And it's a great like 8 megabyte live CD as well.
Yeah, and so is the System Rescue CD. It's also some good stuff that has gparted on it. All right, so let's take a look at my machine here. So if you've been following along, we've now created a file system. What's the top layer called? So you have physical volume. So I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to confuse people. We now have a logical volume that's been partitioned and formatted, and now I'm going to mount it. So we're at the top layer now. We're at the logical volume layer. So I will go ahead and see if I do mount, and then we want to say, now the way it works is it sticks it in a specific part in dev. So you go in /dev, and if you look around there, you'll see all of your logical volumes. And then you can just mount that to any spot on your file system you want, like I've just done here. And now I can just start storing and saving information to it. And if you add it to your FS tab, you do it properly, it'll even just automatically mount when your system boots. And that's pretty cool. Now, Alan, you'd mentioned that BSD has something kind of similar to LVM.
Yes,
right?
actually quite similar. It's called GOM. And it's a layer that allows you to, again, you can create software RAID where you just have, again, the stacked drives, or RAID 0, RAID 1, and so on.
Now,
So in the show notes, I've dropped a link on how you could do this on FreeBSD as well.
Cool. We got a couple of good questions coming out of the chat room that I thought I'd mention. One comes from Crash Benedict, or Benecoot. He asks, what do you do if you want to remove a drive? That's actually, it's totally fine, totally capable of doing that as long as you can afford the storage that drive had, because you can shrink volumes as well. So if you have a 500 gigabyte drive you want to remove, and you have 600 gigabytes free, you're fine. But if you only have like 200 gigabytes free, you're not going to be doing it.
You're going to have to add another drive first or free up some space before you can remove the drive.
Yeah, and if a drive is defective, you're in the same boat, and it can mess it up. So you can also do LVM on top of RAID, but you'll want to go watch TechSnap24 for information about that. There was also a question from Bonfire. He said, where do people normally mount their partitions? Is it /mount? Really depends on your usage. /mount, I'd say, is the stereotypical place to mount a drive under Linux. But I also do under /home, /my username, and then I have like a bunch of toy stuff that I mount in there and stuff like that. So it kind of just depends.
Yeah, like /MNT is usually like a nice temporary place to mount something just for a little bit. But if it's gonna be attached on a regular basis, you likely want to put it somewhere logical.
Yeah. Now, of course, you could also use like the snapshot featuring or the mirroring feature to get some data redundancy in there.
Yep.
But when I mentioned that I was going to be talking about LVM on Google Plus last night, I've been doing this sometimes. I've been going in there and saying, hey, I think we're going to talk about this topic. What do you guys think? I've been getting some really good feedback. And the number one thing that people said about LVM was if you want to do something like on a laptop and you want to get a nice secure setup, look into something called Lux, L-U-K-S. Have you ever heard of this, Alan?
No.
I've only heard of it. I've never used it. And I haven't read much about it, but I believe it's an encryption layer that can sit in conjunction with LVM so that everything in your volume groups is completely encrypted. So you get all the advantages of like being able to resize partitions on the fly and be able to add storage or remove storage dynamically, but you also get encryption on top of that. And on a laptop, that could be really sweet. So if any of you out there have tried that, let me know what you think, because I never have. And so I didn't want to really go into it much on the show. But
FreeBSD has a similar thing. It's called Geli, G-E-L-I. And it's with the way the geom layers work, you can stack them, and so you can have all your disks encrypted with that as well.
Right on. There you go. What's it called again?
Geli, G-E-L-I.
There you go. So check that stuff out. So let me know if you've tried that whole Lux encryption system and how it's worked for you, and if you use LVM, and if you've been following along sort of in the context of all of this, as we're sort of giving you a bunch of good tips and information for building a home server. This kind of thing is perfecto for the home server. My media share, oh man, those media shares just have a tendency to just grow and grow and grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger, especially now that I have a kid. I'm adding stuff to that all the time. And I don't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah, that was the problem I had. Was originally when I set it up, I was like, well, I have a couple of different size drives, and I estimate that this category of my stuff is going to grow, so I'll put it on the drive that's bigger. It's like, so I have like one is like older of my DVDs and one's the newer ones, and like one's for the TV shows and so on. But you always run out of space on one partition and not another. And then you get this message, you're like moving files and creating symbolic links. And it's like,
and
if this is all just one really big volume, I'd have all my problems solved.
And if when you knew you needed more space, you could just add another hard drive and grow it, your money. And it's really, it's a total peace of mind. And the best part is LVM has literally been around for ever. I mean, it's been around for a very long time. It's a mature product. It's not. I've had production systems like using it.
Experimental or anything.
No, and because you get to run your own file system on top of it, there's no limitation there either. If you want to use ButterFS or whatever, ZFS or RiserFS, you can, and that's a really nice flexibility thing. There's other methods to do this in Linux, but I think LVM is like one of the best.
Yep.
EVMS is probably the other one I've heard mentioned the most. Logical Volume Manager, the GUI that I showed off in the show today, is my preferred way to manage LVM. There's also Webmin, which is not really my preferred way.
Nope.
But honestly, you guys, if you want to get your hands a little dirty, go check out the command line version. It's really not bad to use. The commands are simple. And honestly, if you're going to use it on a server, it's probably not a bad idea to learn how to use those command lines, because if you ever have to fix something in a remote session...
when it's broke, it's you're remote or the GUI won't load because it's broke. Having at least even just a passing familiarity with those commands can help you have a starting point.
Yep. Well, Alan, is there anything else you want to cover on LVM?
No, I don't think so.
All right, there you have it, sir.
I think you covered it quite well.
That's the Linux Action Show's look at LVM. And that brings us to the end of this week's broadcast. Now, before we sign off, Al and I wanted to take a quick moment at the end of the shows for a little while here to get some feedback, because we know there's been a lot of changes in the show. People have a lot of things to say. And, of course, we just want to incorporate more audience participation in the show in general anyways. And to that end, Brad Williamson wrote in and touched on a classic topic for the Linux Action Show, and one that fits in really well recently. He said, you asked a while ago for some home server suggestions. And he says, I've tried a lot of different things, but I want to show you guys this piece of software called, and I'm going to try to pronounce this right, Tonido. Tonido. And it's like your own cloud solution in a box. It's got software server-side solution. It's got client-side syncing software, kind of like Dropbox. And it's got smartphone apps to access your data on the go. It also, if you want to, you can buy like a little Pogo plug-like device that is this little Linux box that just goes right into your power plug, and it runs the server software. So you can have a super low power, super quiet, green cloud box.
And I guess, accessing it from your phone is quite useful.
Yeah, dude, yeah.
Like we talked a little bit with the Android app pick last week about, when you're at your house with your wireless being able to access your Samba. But if it's true cloud where you can access stuff you need off your home server when you're not at home.
It's awesome,
That's
right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing for Dropbox to be able to do it, but it's another thing when you can get your own server. And they also include a pretty nice looking web front end to be able to be able to get access to some stuff.
Because, there's always that time when you're not at home and you need that file you left on that server.
Yeah. Thanks to the chat room here, we've got a link to, I guess these guys were interviewed by Floss Weekly in episode 153. So if you want to check that out, I'll try to throw a link to that in the show notes. This looks like a really nice little slick packaging. I love when people take this technology and just make this really nice candy-coated technology or packaging that average users can get their hands on. Yep. And if you peel back the candy-coated layers, there's some Linux goodness under there for you to play with.
Exactly.
Which is honestly why I love that B3 server that I reviewed like forever ago. Is that B3 server, you plug it in and it just sits there, but if you want to, you can SSH to that thing and you've got a full Linux server running on an ARM chip that could do anything you can set your mind on.
That's what you always want. It's like you want the candy coding, but you want to be able to get in there and do stuff yourself as well.
Totally.
That's the mistake a lot of the candy coding companies make, is that you can't get in under the candy coding.
Yeah, and also, isn't it so true, just kind of going back to the Windows 8 story, isn't that exactly what they're trying to do? They don't want me to play with candy.
I think so, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Alan, that just about wraps up this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. Now, apologies, we did shoot this one on Thursday instead of Sunday like our normally regular time. Hopefully I got it out for you on Sunday, because when you're listening to this, if you've downloaded it, there's a very good chance I'm on the road down to Cryptic Studios. Jeremy and I are going down there for our 100th episode of Stoked, and we're going to chat with the devs down at Cryptic. And we're leaving Sunday, normally when this show would be live. So Alan was good enough to join me early on Thursday, and we shot this after TechSnap. So I apologize if you showed up to watch this live on the live stream and were disappointed. Our bad. I meant to give more heads up, but I got the times mixed up because I'm stupid. All right. Well, that just about wraps up this week's episode of the Linux Action Show. Now, you can, of course, normally watch us live at jblive.tv at 10 a.m. on Sundays, and then download the show in just about every single format you could ever want to download it in over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Alan, thanks again for joining me.
No problem.
I appreciate it as always, and I appreciate all of you out there who join us and always who leave us feedback and comments, because we want to get more and more of those into the show, so I encourage you to do so. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Linux Action Show, and we'll see you right back here next Sunday.